Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, wherever in the world you are. We're going to try to create some semblance out of the chaos we find ourselves in. And this is an abridged version going to be presented in 3 parts for easier digestion. It is a message I did this past weekend on how do you run this race. The scripture we're going to use for this 3 parts is from Hebrews, the 12th chapter, verses 1 and 2. Let us run this race with endurance, looking at Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So there'll be a starting and an ending. But before we get into the meat of the message, I want to give you a little bit of advice. There is an old adage, an illustration that was given about what becomes familiar and how it can confuse you or compliment you. For example, when you go out and buy a new automobile, and let's say you picked the most unusual color and it was one of those brands that a lot of people don't necessarily gravitate towards, and you feel special and unique in that approach. When you're driving along, your natural tendency is to start looking and identifying everything that is very similar to that which you thought was unique. The same seems to work in this artificial intelligence paradigm. We find ourselves inundated by information and posts that come in from a myriad ways. And as a result, when you click on something or seem to favor something or like something that is information, the algorithms within AI will ensure that you see more of that in the days ahead. So I started doing something by eliminating all those posts of the graphics of the world and the data and the quantitative information that was more depressing than it was promising. So how then do you run this race with endurance and inner stamina and inner fortitude that tells you in between the race that there are components to this and the race can begin at any point? I think that's what Scripture is telling us here. So the first part of my missive in running this race with endurance, looking at Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, the first thing is every race has a starting block. And we are finding ourselves in a new race now. We are asking ourselves to regroup ourselves and recommission ourselves and repurpose ourselves almost in quarantine and isolation to find a new way of life, only reaching out to the world through digital platforms like I'm doing to you right now. So one of these races that began for me recently was a new race when I was asked to go to the country of Albania by 2 very dear friends, one who I'd met in Belfast some years ago and one who has been an encourager for the last 15 years. The latter being Brad, the former being Pastor Gensi, who operates in the city of Durrës in Albania. When I arrived in this country, it came with some great hesitation because I didn't understand what I was doing there. I felt myself pretty preoccupied for the world I live in. Yesterday, in one of the messages on a Zoom conference, I was able to share this when they said, "What do you do for consistency?" I said, "I keep the main thing, which means I don't change the discipline of who I am to react or respond to the requirement of what I do." So here I was in Albania, a country that had seen repeated strife in its own history. First by the Romans, then by the Ottomans, then by communism, a people that were finally free, finding themselves where the legends of old dictate what goes on there, and then the motifs of modernity seem to coalesce and give them some inkling of hope. So here I was. The first day I landed there, I realized this was a race I'm going to run, and I'm going to look at Jesus for the endurance because I had never met a sweeter, kinder, gentler, more hospitable people. The cuisine was out of this world. The hospitality was awe-inspiring. The scenery breathtaking. Mountains on one side, the ocean on the other side. I began this race by saying, what's not to like? So this morning, when you look at your first part, that this new race requires a starting block? What is the optimism that is going to engage within you, that is going to force you to do something new, something unique, something bright? Many years ago, John Wesley, I think, said this, and E. Stanley Jones may have paraphrased it in another way, saying, every day when you look at the news of this world, is it new, is it true, is it you? Now, you may not know someone who has been directly afflicted with this pandemic, but you are required as part of planet Earth, part of the global denizen of 7.85 billion people, to accept this edict, march with great fortitude, looking internally into the endurance that is given to you and looking at the author and finisher of our faith. I remember preaching the funeral of my best friend where I looked at his mother who was grieving the burial of a child. And I said, Mom, today Rich is looking at us from a world before when he was with us. He's looking at the world in which we are grieving without him. And he is looking forward to a world when he will see us again. In short, he will see us quicker than we will see him. And the mother got comfort. Find some ideas this week. Find some opportunities this month. Find some new innovations this year to allow you to run this race with endurance. Again, let us run this race with endurance, says the scriptwriter, looking at Jesus, the author and finisher. So whatever is going on in the world around you, someone already knows how it began, the great I am. Someone knows how it will end when he says, at the right hand of God the Father. In between, we have to live out this identity with endurance. So just like that brand new race I got to run in that beautiful country of Albania, when we meet next time, I will stare with you how now you move from the starting block to having the discipline of a timing clock. Talk to you soon on the next video.